Good morning. Sorry, the mic was on mute. Elvis here.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm all right. And how are you, Mr. Casalo?
Fine, thank you.
Okay, that's good.
Judith, are you there?
Good morning, everybody. I hope I'm audible. I'm here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. We'll start in a short while.
Good morning, Mr. Casaro.
Good morning. Is that Ruben?
Yes, Ruben here.
Yes, welcome. We'll start in a short while.
Okay. I've noticed the other panelists do not have video on. Should I turn off my video? Is it?
Keep your video on.
Okay.
Yeah, because you are one of the speakers.
All right. Okay. I've seen there's Mr. Nurenda there.
Can't see what's happening. The other participants, where are they? Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this session of the webinar, which is a continuation of our programs leading to the Luapula Water and Energy Week, which will be happening which will be taking place from 26th to 30th April 2021. My name is Ezekiel Casaro. I'm hosting this program for the energy part. And today we are looking at how to address the energy deficit in Luapula. To assist me with this discussion, I've got Judith Raphael, Elvis Nurenda, and Ruben Munongwe. I'll ask each one of them to introduce themselves. Then we move on to the discussion. Judith, are you there?
I am here. I'll just put my camera on. Good morning, everybody. I hope I'm audible. My name is Judy Raphael. I'm the resident director for the Get Fit Zambia program, and I'll give a little bit more information on that in a while. Thank you.
Then we're gonna have Elvis.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Elvis Nirenda, as you have seen. I'm an energy expert in renewable energy, as well as I've done a lot of projects, and I've got over 10 years of experience working in a power utility company within the country Zambia. And I'm also helping on the integrated resource planning for Zambia under the Ministry of Energy. So I'm glad to be invited for this wonderful event. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Lastly, but not least, can we have Ruben?
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Ruben Mulengwe. I'm from the Copper Belt Energy Corporation. Working in a department known as Business Expansion Project, where I'm leading a team looking at expansion projects to do with generation, transmission development. And talking about the generation, there is now a focus where we are looking at the opportunities in renewables. And we've been, the company has put its efforts for a period of time. We have developed a solar farm. We will have quite a number of projects that we are pursuing to do solar development, looking at wind, and also mini small hydros. We've also been involved in feasibility studies on the Luapula River, looking at the hydropower potential. And you know that I've been actively involved in over 15 years of experience in projects, and that's what we do. Hope to have a fruitful discussion.
Thank you. As I already stated, our topic is addressing the energy deficit in Luapula. Luapula is one of the provinces, of course, in Zambia. The government is held expo last year or the other year to look at how partners can come in and develop Luapula. If we go to Luapula, you are on the website, you'll see Luapula has got a framework on how it wants to move in terms of as a province and to assist the population. It has got a set goals, which are in agriculture, energy, tourism, mining, and forestry. Now, given all this, we need to appreciate that in our last topic, we discussed energy as an enabler, and we all know that for energy development, industrial development to take place, or for energy. So we need to look at that from that angle and see what is it, what is happening in Luapula, and what is the deficit, and how is this deficit going to be addressed. To help me with that discussion, we have, as indicated, Judith, Elvis, and Ruben. I'll ask each one of them to give an overview of their contribution to the topic, and then we can follow it up with question and answer. Thank you. To start the discussion, I'll ask Judith with that.
Good morning again. I've sent through a presentation, so if you can just start the presentation, I'll give a brief overview using the presentation. So I thought maybe just to start the discussion, I'll give a short presentation on what Get Fit Zambia is about, and just what we are currently doing to help address the energy deficit in Luapula, I think, as well as Zambia at large. So you can just move to the next slide. Essentially, the Get Fit program is it's a program cooperation between the German government as well as the Zambian government. There's a grant funding amount of around 41 million, and that is being funded through the KfW, which is a German development bank. So what does Get Fit aim to do, and how do we plan to contribute towards the energy deficit? We've been allocated under the refit strategy, which was approved by Cabinet in 2017, a total amount of 205 megawatts to be procured by private sector entities. We are looking at both hydro, solar, and then we've agreed with the Ministry of Energy to add a further 5 megawatts of microgen to this, and I will give a bit more information on this. As indicated, eligible technologies under the refit strategy by government is solar, hydro, geothermal, wind, biomass, and project sizes are up to 20 megawatts. Aim of the program, as well as the refit strategy, is to contribute towards diversification. I think we are aware that currently about 80.8% of capacity in Zambia is hydro, and there is quite a number of issues in periods of drought where we've had experience of load shedding. So purpose of the program really is to try and contribute towards the diversification of the energy mix. It's also hoping to procure power on a competitive basis in order to ensure that least cost power is generated and procured for Zambian business and citizens. So essentially what the program hopes to do is to improve framework conditions to enable and stimulate private sector investment in small scale, at the moment, on-grid renewable energy projects. And part of also what we plan on doing is to help the government set up a standardized procurement framework, as well as documentation in order to enable this. Just on the next slide, I'll quickly touch on these. These are essentially what we call the toolbox. So these are the elements under our program that we're currently utilizing to stimulate the growth. I've touched on the procurement, so try and create certainty by creating a procurement framework and working together with the Ministry of Energy on this. And then to address some of the liquidity constraints, I think especially for small-scale businesses, we're working together with the African Trade Insurer in order to implement a debt and risk mitigation facility. We call it the Regional Liquidity Facility. So it's helped to provide liquidity, especially in the first 12 months of the project implementation. And then critical to the program really, and this is where most of the 41 million grant funding, around 80% of that goes towards, and that's the viability gap funding and what we call the grid facility. How do these two work? These two items are essentially there to help augment and stimulate scale up in technologies that are not yet widely being implemented. So viability gap funding and the grid facility is really earmarked for the small hydro program, where it is technologies that are a bit more complex to implement. It costs quite a bit of upfront, or it requires rather quite a bit of upfront development costs. And then these are the projects that are usually quite far from the grid, because good hydro projects are where hydrology is best. And so unfortunately, at times it could be in areas where the grid has not yet reached. And then we've got a technical assistance component as well. And this is mainly there to help address the skills gap and any other TA requirements that the government may identify as the program goes on. Next slide. So this slide just indicates what we're trying to achieve under a competitive process. First program was a solar PV tender. It was initially allocation of 100, but we had a very good price outcome, and as a result, we agreed with the ministry to increase the capacity from 100 to 120. It was a pure competitive bidding process, so it entailed a bid auction, and at the time, the program achieved one of the lowest tariff outcomes in sub-Saharan Africa, and that was at 3.99 cents. So for those of you that are familiar with current average prices in Zambia, it's quite significantly below that. As indicated, 120 megawatts was eventually procured, awarded to 6 solar IPPs. This includes CC Innovant, so one local Zambian entity in partnership with Innovant. And then we've got Globalic and the previous Building Energy, now known as Red Rocket. So those are the 3 entities that were each awarded 2 projects under the program. Our next program that we're looking at, and that could be maybe also of more interest to this discussion, is the small hydro program. This program will unfortunately not be a competitive process, but it will be based on refits that have been calculated by ERB to ensure that it still remains within competitive levels and that it's not too far above estimated average tariffs in Zambia. The viability gap funding is essentially going to be utilized in this to help augment IPP returns. So instead of having a high refit tariff, the viability gap funding will be used in order to assist with that. And then we've also got a grid facility that will be helping with funding of the grid connection between the power plant as well as the nearest connection point to the ZESCO grid at this stage. But I do think that everybody is aware that we now have the open access market, and so we may try and reframe this component to try and see how we can benefit from the open access market and try and alleviate further financial strain on ZESCO. Pre-qualification process has already happened. We've pre-qualified about 30 entities. We've worked with the Ministry of Energy to allocate feasibility study rights. Approximately 44 sites have been allocated. RFP was initially planned for last year, but because of COVID, and I think some of the macroeconomic impacts that it's had, not only in Zambia, but globally, we were forced to postpone the program until there is a bit more certainty, and we are quite sure that we are able to achieve financial close for the solar PV projects. Next slide, please. This next slide is really meant to highlight how we can contribute further to the deficit, especially in the Luapula area, and what we are currently considering. So under the grid facility, one of the key opportunities that we've identified, especially since these power plants that have been earmarked in that area so far from the grid, is that we are currently exploring potential for rural electrification around the areas where these projects would be. So if I can just highlight, these blue dots are where we expect some of the various sites to be There's quite a number of sites that have been identified in this area, and then around this top area here as well. And the green area is some of the electrification potential that we have highlighted. And so one of the key things that we are currently looking at is within the RFP document, we will be asking the IPPs to try and identify some of the load centers within the vicinity. It will be a requirement for them to include this in the bid in order to see whether or not there would be any potential for electrification or supplying of load in that area. It could be either grid extension, so they could try and see whether or not could electrify working together with RIA and ZESCO, or the other option is to try and see if there would be a possibility to supply to mini grids if those two get established in that area. Preliminary assessments, I think we can see that potential hydro sites in that area is around 245 megawatts. So there's quite a high potential for hydro power in that area. A potential to reach around 349 settlements. And we're looking at around 67,500 households, and therefore quite a sizable number of the population that could be electrified if all goes well. I think based on preliminary data that we had, we have noticed that we may require around 2.5 million euro in order to construct the distribution lines. Maybe one thing that I do have to also indicate, some of these projects that we've identified in the area are quite close to so there are some grid, there are some substations and distribution lines, transmission lines in those areas. So for those projects that are quite close to the grid, there will be a competitive process to make sure that they do bid in for viability gap funding, and they will be, and they also have to bid in for the grid cost, and this would enable us to optimize funding that could be then available for these distribution lines to help with electrification. And then the other thing that I just wanted to highlight is under the TA component, we're currently utilizing CHESI. They were appointed after a procurement process in order to develop a short-term grid development plan. And that plan actually is aimed at identifying some grid strengthening opportunities and further unpacking electrification potential in the various regions where we've identified these small hydropower projects. So the aim really is to try and work together with other DFIs to try and see if we can't increase current funding under the KfW grant in order to increase potential for electrification if this would at all be possible. Next slide, please. The next slide just speaks around the micro generation tender. This one, we actually trying to be quite creative under this component. As indicated, we had actually initially been allocated 200 megawatts, 100 for solar, up to 100 for hydro. But the solar tender had at the time been quite competitive. The requirements for the tender there were quite stringent requirements for the tender at the time, and we had received quite a number of complaints that it had not catered sufficiently for local Zambian developers to participate in the solar tender. As a result, we've agreed with the Ministry of Energy that we would have a microgen component. This would mainly be focused on local developers, so all entities participating in this program has to be majority Zambian owned. Again, it's to improve framework conditions, so not only for international entities, but also for private sector entities in Zambia. At the moment, 5 megawatts. So here you can see that we're looking at 1 megawatt slots, so 5 megawatt solar park. It would have a single grid connection, At the moment, we're still trying to see whether or not it would be a mini grid, or if we're able to also be creative under this process and maybe identify an alternative off-taker. We are working with the Citizens Economic Empowerment Commissioner, as well as the Kafue Gorge Regional Training Center, and they helping us at this stage identify potential sites to enable this. The CEEC is looking at the development of industrial parks, and so we're trying to see whether or not it would be then able to have this solar park close to one of those. Again, under this facility, we will have a TA component that will be used to assist the local developers with obtaining financing. And at the moment, we're also working with Zanaco, or NAPSA, we're hoping to work with in the DBZ to try and see if they're able to provide local funding for the project. So aim really is also to ensure that we can have partnerships between local institutions and international institutions in order to further build capacity and create a platform for future energy investments in Zambia. I think this is my last slide, so I will then conclude and can take questions at a later stage. Thanks for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Judith. So there we are. It's happening in Luapula that already there are activities which are being ongoing to address the energy deficit. But for question. Sorry, the internet dropped. We are back. Elvis, you can go ahead. You're muted. Thank you.
Good morning once more. I gave a brief background about myself already. And thank you, Judy, for the wonderful presentation. I know Get Fit, they are doing a lot of projects. Our take for Luapula, regarding a few studies that we've taken up, we've seen that indeed there's a challenge in terms of power, starting from transmission expansion, including generation projects. But it suffices to say that the load for Luapula hasn't grown all that much. So as we even identify potential investors, quite okay, from the previous expo, which was done, about 40 companies in terms of mining are interested in investing in Luapula, which means that there is huge demand for electricity expansion projects. Then in the renewable energy environment, we have identified that there is a huge potential, not only for hydro, but also for solar, because Luapula records an average of 5.76 kilowatt hours per square meter per hour in terms of solar irradiation, which is very good for the development of solar within Luapula. Then the main hydro power plants, which we have on that side of the country. We see that there is Musonda, which is the run of the river hydropower plant, which means that production depends on the occurrences in terms of weather patterns, especially during the dry spells. Production goes low. Quite okay, it was expanded to 10 megawatts, but production go below even 5 megawatts, which poses a greater threat to the economic advancement of Luapula. Therefore, another investment which we are looking at is battery energy storage, because energy storage offers flexibility as well as stability where renewable energy are concerned, especially on that part of the country. We have seen that not just in Mansa, for example, the other parts of Luapula, they experience low voltages. Lights, for example, they dim even during especially peak period when the grid is constrained. Therefore, the abundant solar resource which can be tapped, it can be stored during the day, and it can be discharged in the utility grid during the time when there is poor irradiation and when the grid is constrained, so that we can offer stability and increase the uptake of that power when investors come into the region. Then secondly, Luapula, we have seen that much of the people, they don't have access to electricity. The grid only runs from Chipiri, Mansa, Samfya, Kawambwa, but much of the population in villages, they don't have this access to electricity. So there's huge potential for the development of mini grids, as well as independent solar systems, especially for schools and remote hospitals, which is going to provide cheaper solutions to the people of Luapula. So we, in our target to include the investors for developing Luapula, but also our focus also should look at what an individual in terms of energy consumption can be able to uptake. The small units, especially the portable solar home systems, can also go a long way for Luapula, so that each and everybody, all the citizens, can be able to buy into the solutions which we are offering for Luapula. Then in terms of our support in our energy consulting path, we've done some studies with CGM, Zambia. They are planning to put up a solar power plant with battery storage, that is 50 megawatts at Mansa and Luapula, at Mansa and Chipiri, I should say, with the planned total capacity by 2025, they would want to increase that power to over 150 megawatts. So like for Get Fit, those are part of the investors we should be able to look at. Their studies are quite advanced. And then on the other hand, our colleagues on the other side, that is DRC, because they are neighbors, only separated by the Luapula River. We are also trying to see how we can offer our technical support to them as well, so that we can tap into the resource which is on the other side. Then I picked one item from Judy, especially on the Luapula hydro. You've seen this project has been there for some time. There has been a lot of stagnation, especially from the financiers, KfW, African Development Bank, the World Bank as well. The information I have is that quite okay pre-feasibility studies have been done for about 5 sites. They selected 3 sites which can go into the full feasibility studies. Financing is being looked into so that that can be able to be achieved. But there was a very important suggestion. If you've seen, due to climatic challenges which the entire world is facing at the moment, where earth temperatures have increased to at most 1.8 degrees, unlike the way the situation used to be. We've seen that, and due to the population growth, there's going to be huge demand, not just for electricity, but demand for clean water and demand for pure oxygen here, which we need to sustain our environment. And looking at where Luapula Hydro uh, is, we've seen that the northern part of Africa is dry, Sahara Desert. Then on the southern half of our country also, we've seen Kalahari Desert, Namib Desert. That part, as continuously the desert area is glowing. So meaning the only part which can be preserved, as in we make sure that the environmental aspects are sustained, is across the equator. So probably other financiers have been very skeptical in developing the Luapula Hydro, which means that alternative sources, apart from large hydro, small hydropower plants, and renewable energy power plants, especially wind and solar, um, have got a huge potential actually to bring development to Luapula, and not just Luapula, as a country, Zambia as a whole. So briefly, in a nutshell, that was my short presentation. I can beg for forgiveness. I didn't prepare the PowerPoint slide, but I think um, much of the information will be given in detail in the due
Thank you
course.
very much,
Thank you so
Elvis.
much.
Thank you very much, Elvis. I think you have, although you don't have slides, but you have made a good presentation. I think it has highlighted what other people are doing in Luapula and what you are looking at in your team to provide for the deficit in Luapula. Thank you. At this point, I'll ask briefly to Ruben to also make his presentation. Then we can quickly discuss and ask for if there are any questions from the public. Please go ahead and type into the space provided at the bottom of your screen. You have the question and answer, or a chat. You type it in, and then we'll be able to direct the question to the relevant persons, and then they'll be able to assist with the answer. Ruben.
Thank you very much, moderator, and thank you for the first two presenters for elaborate presentations. I shared our presentation with the technical team. Perhaps at this time, I'd expect that they should display it. Thank you. First of all, I want to talk about our organization, the Copperbelt Energy Corporation, CEC in short, is a privately owned power utility, which is involved in power generation, transmission, distribution, and supply. We are a member of the Southern African Power Pool, and we have been one of the pioneers, in forming this organization, and we have been pioneers in power trading as well. We are also listed at the Lusaka Securities Exchange, where we have in excess of 4,500 individual and institutional investors. We are involved in supplying power mainly to the mining clients in the Copperbelt province, and also Katanga region of the DRC, where we are involved in offering services through our subsidiary company, CEC DRC. We are an asset-rich company owning and operating multi-million generation facilities, as well as transmission infrastructure. And to that, we have over 1,000 kilometers of 220 and 66 kV high voltage lines. We also have embedded generation, as I mentioned, via gas turbine plants, which are dotted around the Copperbelt. We recently commissioned, developed a 1 megawatt solar plant, which is located in Kitwe, adjacent to the university. We also have a grid connection to an independent power producer, Dangote. We recently commissioned our line and substation. In a nutshell, that's what the Copper Belt Energy is about. And before I forget, we are also involved in a biofuel production. We do have a 900,000 liters per annum capacity, a plant in Kitwe where we are producing biodiesel. Perhaps at this stage, I move on to focus on what we want to look at in terms of Luapula. We're looking at Luapula as strategically located, as I gave in my preamble, the business location of the Copper Belt Energy. We are in the Copper Belt and Katanga. And if you look at the map, Luapula sits very well and in close proximity to these two economic zones. So we're looking at the strategic location of Luapula, and we now delve into the opportunities, leveraging this location. And then we'll look at the challenges. What are some of the things that have impeded growth? And in this instance, we're looking at power generation, power transmission infrastructure. Why have these projects stagnated despite this huge potential and opportunities? Then probably we'll look at, perhaps in closure, we'll look at concluding and make a few recommendations. You can go to the next slide. So as I was saying, that Luapula has a very, very strategic location. If you look at in the region, one of the biggest load centers sits on the Zambian Copper Belt and also in the Katanga region. And we have this situation where, for example, in Zambia, we have a geographic severity in terms of the power generation plants and the load centers. In Zambia, we have a situation where power is mainly generated on the southern side, and I'm referring to the bigger plants, which are the hydro plants at Kafue Gorge, as well as Kariba. We are also saying that Luapula has this potential in terms of not only bringing the required power to these load centers, but also technically it will strike a balance, as it will bring some technical stability, because then we can have injection. If we did develop all the sources in Luapula, we have injection that will be coming from the northern side in this case. So that is how strategic Luapula is. We are looking at the growth, the related growth and energy being an enabler. We are sitting to the areas which account for close or more than 3% of world copper production. And as we know, mining business and mining operations they are huge, they're highly energy intensive. So they require vast amounts of power in order to sustain those operations. We are also looking at the other industrial sectors that have potential, in this case, agriculture. Recently, we've noticed the interest in by investors to develop sugar production facilities, which we know that they require energy as well. We've seen a lot of mining activities around certain locations in Luapula, Mansa, Kawambwa. There's manganese, there's prospects for coltan and copper and cobalt. But we do realize that these businesses are being stifled, and they can't go to achieve the expected outputs without energy or power or good power supply. We can move to the next slide. So now, how do we harness these opportunities? We are also looking at the opportunity of where there's a focus, there's a priority sort of approach towards Luapula. We've seen government policies of opening up the northern circuit in terms of tourism. Besides the other industrial or economic sectors. And we are saying that such policies will improve the accessibility of the province, first of all, and this will spur industrial growth. And obviously, for industry to grow, we need to have an equivalent. We need to have an equivalent growth in terms of power infrastructure, to cater for this growth. We have talked about the potential in terms of the sugar industry. We are also looking at the new Electricity Act, which we think is a good step in terms of opening up the access to the grid. The previous two presenters did allude to the fact that there's also potential for mini grids, and other grids, but whether we like it or not, we need this power to flow into the economic zones, and open access gives that good avenue in terms of linking the surplus agents to the deficit in terms of energy. We are saying that as private investors, we do not only need to build power stations, we need to have the transmission infrastructure which is accessible in order for us to evacuate our generation to go into the supply areas. We are also saying that it would be very, very good if we could, accelerate the cost of service study, as this gives a very good parameter to investors, those who want to come into any sector of electricity market, because obviously it will give you a baseline, and it will sort of give you some determination in terms of your markup. And it will also bring the element of cost reflectivity in terms of the tariffs. And we think that the cost, as we call it, will result into a stable and a predictable tariff for transactions between independent power producers, independent power transmitters, as well as the consumers at the end of the chain. We are also looking at the collaboration because of the proximity of the economic zone sitting in two different countries. We're looking at the DRC as well. So we are keenly, interested in what is going on in terms of the reform. And one of the things that we know is that the DRC has passed a law that sort of requires payment of security on PSAs. Now, what this does is it brings the level of risk lower, especially for power investment. So we should be looking at the DRC as one of the lowest hanging fruit in terms of the market, and Luapula sits very, very well positioned. Next slide. My other two colleagues who spoke before myself did allude to the fact that Luapula does not only have potential for hydro power, it also has a lot of potential for solar, and CEC has a strategic position where we want to harness renewables, especially solar. Currently, we are involved in a project where we'll be expanding our solar plants, and definitely the focus is not just around it. We are looking at Luapula and other areas which have got endowment in terms of the sun hours and all the parameters that are required for solar generation. And Luapula definitely does sit at the top of that list. We are also looking at accelerating and quickly investing into power generation by way of having islanded generation centers. And this, obviously, this is the focus of solar, so that you can now position your plants even before the main carriage transmission lines are constructed. You can sort of have this position very close to the load center. We're also looking at taking advantage of the potential, public-private partnerships, looking out for the projects that the government obviously will put on the table to be jointly developed with private entities like us. And in hindsight, I'm also looking at the Luapula River, which has got so many potential sites, which we think it's not going to be done by one investor. You need a collaboration. We have 5 sites on the Luapula River itself, where we can generate up to between 800 to 1,000 megawatts. And we are saying that these sites developed as run-of river have got a possibility of having different owners, different investors. And those are sort of things that can accelerate development of Luapula if we approached it in that manner. We're also looking at areas which have shown potential for solar. There's a mention of the Chimpempe and the Monguluma areas, and we are specifically highlighting these ones as possible, hybrid type of development, where you have the hydro conjunctively coming in with the solar. My previous speaker did mention that, yes, Luapula tends to have a very high flow during the rain season. And we looked at the hydro facilities. Most of them could be developed as run-of-river. And during the low flow seasons, we lose production in terms of those facilities. Now, what happens in the low flow is that the sunshine hours increases. So we can have some of these sites developed in hybrid configuration, where you have solar, which is conjunctive to the hydro, in order to have to increase the level of dispatchability. Next slide. So having said this, why are we where we are instead of being, a few steps ahead? We've noticed that there are challenges, obviously some of them unique to Luapula, and we thought that we should talk about those challenges, especially those which lie within the energy or power infrastructure development. We are looking at the regulatory regime. What sort of procedures or what sort of environment do we have? Does it support, accelerated development? Does it incentivize, does it give incentives to investors in order to harness and exploit the opportunities fairly quickly? So, and also, have we catered for all the areas? Because sometimes you have to start with the smaller grids, the micro mini grids. Together you coalesce them, you end up with maybe the energy demand in that area. So we're trying to say, hey, maybe these are areas that we need to look at and improve for an accelerated, development of Luapula. We're also looking at what sort of bureaucratic tendencies do we have? Are we highly bureaucratic? Does that sort of give support? Does that give advantage to investors? In this case, I'm talking about private investors. Or does it even encourage triple Ps? So we are looking at some of those challenges that maybe we need to have a way to improve certain things in order for us to, to reach our target of taking Luapula where it's supposed to be. We're also looking at the market access in terms of the reforms. I earlier on alluded to what is happening in the Congo, of course, even in Zambia, but how much is that influencing, especially bringing in independent power producers? Is that access, broad enough that we have these independent power producers, keen to moving and, expedite the projects and deliver them. So those are sort of things that we're looking at, that maybe they sit on the challenge side. We're also looking at the security of the infrastructure. Do we have guarantee over a certain period, over a certain horizon? Are we sure those assets will still belong to the private players, or are we stable in terms of policies that do not encourage appropriation and rather give the security to investors? So those are the things that we are looking at to say, look, if we did certain things better, we can actually have the Luapula that we have. With those words said, I think I'll end here and ready to take on any clarifications and questions. So in terms of the conclusion, we're saying that we need to prioritize and incentivize the power sector as a driver for the growth, any growth that we envisage for Luapula. We also need to take advantage, hoping that the MOU that has been signed between the governments of the Republic of Zambia and DRC, in terms of enhancing the existing cross-border investment between the two countries. We hope that this is operationalized quickly so that obviously other players can take advantage. We're also looking at the conclusion of the cost of service study. And as I said, this has got a very big catch because whichever way you look at it, it's a catalyst in terms of development of energy infrastructure. We're also saying that there need to be specific incentives, especially for investors that are focusing on Luapula or that are eyeing Luapula. So some of these incentives, they will spur the growth and accelerate the development of the province. We are also saying that as a private sector, we obviously appreciate some of the initiatives that the government has taken, especially exposing Luapula and its potential through the expos, through activities such as what we're doing, and also creating that platform of signing a joint development agreement with the DRC. We think this is a very, very a big plus, and this must be encouraged. And obviously, as investors, we must leverage such a positive development. With that said, this is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruben. We have listened to our presenters for the day in terms of how we can address the energy deficit in Luapula. Yes, there are several activities taking place, and even this Luapula Water and Expo, Water and Energy Expo is part of that program to address some of this deficit. Now, there is a question which was been posed to say, is there a roadmap, and what is the cost implications for power supply to Luapula? I'll have the first attempt to, then I'll ask the panel to come in. Now, the roadmap, as you may note, is that development is a two-way. You must find someone who has a need, and then you provide for that need. And that's why we are bringing together this program, the Luapula Water and Energy Expo, to create that rapport in terms of identifying the energy suppliers and the market. And in so doing, you have a roadmap on how these activities will be undertaken. Also, you may have heard that the governments of Zambia and DRC have signed an MOU. So all that is part of the roadmap in trying to address energy deficit in Luapula. But by and large, private sector is still requested to participate. So this is where we are bringing in the Luapula Water and Energy Expo. Now, specifically in terms of implications, yes, the implications in taking energy or supply in Luapula will always depend on the technology you choose, the size of the investment you want to put in. Is there any existing infrastructure in the area? Do we have transmission line or otherwise for the energy? And finally, and mostly, it's the cost of funding. So these are some of the drivers which create the enabler to be put in place if well taken care of in terms of technology, size, existing infrastructure, and the funding. Anyone from the team who can add on in terms of that question?
I could probably attempt an answer to that as well. Just to say, under the TA facility that we're currently looking at, I think I'd highlighted the fact that we are trying to see or work together with the Ministry of Energy as well as ZESCO and RIA to develop this short-term, I think what we call a short-term grid development plan. The aim of that plan, I think I've indicated, is really to try and see whether or not it's possible to come up with short-term grid strengthening stroke grid reinforcement opportunities. I've indicated that it is around the northwestern Luapula area, and I'm hoping that would also give some indication of a roadmap. It's a short-term plan, so it's basically looking at the next 15 years, if I'm not mistaken. And so it's aimed at identifying what investments can be made over the short term, which is probably the next 5 years, 10 years, and then the 15-year period. It's as I indicated, also aimed at trying to see what it would cost to try and ensure extension of the grid and integration of small hydro programs in that area. So I just wanted to say that this can at least provide some form of a roadmap, or hopefully contribute to this roadmap for future development in that area. I hope that answers part of the question.
Thank you very much, Judith. We have another question which says, will there be deployment opportunities for engineers soon, or the entire team is already there? I don't know which to which entity this is addressed, but I would suppose maybe would take CEC, who are already in the area trying to do things, to answer that question.
Thank you very much, moderator. Thank you very much, moderator. Employment opportunities, yes. Given the position that if we were to start developing some of the projects that we are interested in Luapula, there's two levels at which employment opportunities come through. The first being during, obviously, during development of a project, the construction phase, you have quite some number of people that are obviously involved, different skills, because we've noticed that most power infrastructure projects involve multiple skills during development. So those are opportunities. And obviously in the operation stage as well, we obviously have people that have to do maintenance and operation to maintain that facility.
Thank you very
So
much.
long and short of it is that yes, definitely, once projects start moving, employment opportunities will be there.
Thank you very much, Ruben. There is another question which was asking in terms of what are the expected returns on these projects or investments. I think these are project specific, and as people develop their projects, the expected investment returns on those investments will be determined by the different parameters on the ground. There was another question which was asking if someone puts up a mini grid, will that be taken over, or will that be displaced by rural electrification? I think during the Get Fit program, there were several policy documents which were developed in trying to protect private sector in mini grids. I think I would advise Mr. Mwale to look at those documentation. Mwale is the one who has sent this question to look at that documentation and see, and the government has put in place policy and the guidelines on how they will protect the private sector even in mini grid arrangements. The conference is open to everyone, whether foreign or local. So please, we look forward to meeting you in Luapula. Will be on 26th to 30th. Wonderful presenters. This is all we had to share with you today. Shortly, we will be going into the water sector part. And for that, I'll hand over to Lemi Mayanga to take it up. Thank you again to all of you, and goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Can I do it from here?
Thank you.
MD, how are you? You are muted. I can't get you.
Hello, hello.
How are you? Good, I'm fine.
Great. Yeah. Welcome to the water session of this webinar in a series culminating into the Luapula Expo, slated for the 26th to the 30th of April. And this is the third in a series of 4. Today's topic is integrated water resources management, the role of stakeholders. This is a critical topic, and to help me discuss this topic, I do have Dr. Charles Shindaile, who is the technical advisor for water resources with GIZ, and engineer Kenneth Chense, who is the MD for Luapula Water and Sanitation Company. Unfortunately, our third speaker, Engineer Muzumara, could not be with us due to some other challenging circumstances. Nonetheless, to set our ball rolling, the concept of integrated water resources is over 2 decades old and is yet to be understood by some individuals in government institutions that do not seem to understand, I would say. They purport it to be a concept that is not practical. And this is not a story, but reality. You can imagine in the year 2021. The implementation of IWRM is failing for no other reasons but rather our own ignorance as professional bureaucrats responsible for managing our water resources. And I think I have no apologies for that. Integrated water resources management is the answer to the challenge of finding an approach that could work on how we treat people and the environment in which we live. Having said that, when you look at integrated water resources management as a concept, the key word there is integrated or integration. And if you look at a dictionary, you will note that integration simply means to form, coordinate, or blend into a functioning or unified whole. Having said that, to our speakers, they are about 5, 6 sub questions that we'll address. We'll look at what integrated water resources management is in simple terms. And we will also look at the question, is it workable, and give a few examples in the Luapula River Basin. And why is integrated water resources management so topical? How can stakeholders be involved? And how this engagement can be financed. Then to cap it all, we will also look at the enabling environment or framework where you can implement integrated water resources management, and hence the proposed Luapula River Authority. To start the discussion, I will ask, probably today we'll go for Engineer Kenneth Chense to set us rolling. As he's preparing to come in, our next topic, which is slated for the 21st April 2021, we'll look at innovative financing mechanisms to manage the growing water demand in the catchment. And you can also follow us on our Facebook page entitled Luapula Expo. Thank you. Engineer Chense, sir.
Okay. I sent my presentation. Would you like to share the screen?
Okay. Let us just have it exposed. Just a minute. Okay, engineer, are you able to see the slide?
Not yet. I'm sure it will come.
All right. It is displayed. I can see it here.
It hasn't come. Dr. Shindai, are you able to see it?
Yes, I'm able to see.
Okay. Here it doesn't display.
Okay. As we are setting up this technical, Doc, would you mind to go first?
No problem. I can go first. Yeah, and I'm going to share my presentation also. Just confirm to me when you see it.
All right.
Can I take control? It's telling me that you are sharing. Can you stop sharing?
Okay, all right. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. Okay, great.
It's so good to notice that our energy speakers are still online. Please stay online and contribute to the discussion. It's quite interesting. Yes, Doc, go ahead.
Okay, are we able to see my slides?
Yes, I can see something entitled Legislation of Stakeholder Involvement. Okay, yes, sure.
Okay, I'm there now. Good.
Great.
Yeah. Engineer Chense, are you there? Okay, I'll start by saying integrated water resource management. Yes, as you alluded to, is still, though it is 2 decades old, but is still new to many minds. And people need to be sensitized so that they learn and understand what it means.
Sure.
Okay, let me go through. This is my presentation outline. Where it says agenda, that's fine. So look at your same questions. What is integrated water resource management in simple terms, and going through up to conclusion. So what it is, first of all, we look at what is the bedrock of IWRM. We are talking of 3 principles here that are anchoring IWRM. First of all, is the social equity, where we're looking at everyone to have a share of this water for their survival. That is in terms of quantity and quality, to make sure that they are able to survive as human beings, especially the poor, because they can be bulldozed with those that have got a lot of money. The second one is economic efficiency, and here we are talking of the benefits to all those that can actually access the water in their particular areas. If everyone can have that benefit, then we'll be saying we are managing, and that is within the available water resource, and of course financial resources available. And we are talking about environment here. We shouldn't forget that it's environment that keeps us all. So we need to manage this water sustainably, meaning we need to provide for the environment also, so that the aquatic ecosystems can also survive and give us the services that they were meant to actually provide to all creatures and humankind. Now, the Global Water Partnership, they also have a definition of IWRM, and I just quoted exactly what they are saying. And they are saying that, sorry, I just want to shift this. Okay. They are saying that IWRM is a process which promotes a coordinated development and management of water, land, and other related resources within their periphery, as well as a catchment, sub-catchment, or a micro-catchment, in order to maximize the resultant economic and social welfare. Social welfare is very, very important in this case, in an equitable manner without compromising the sustainability of vital ecosystems. I like this definition. Now, is it workable? My answer to that is yes, 100% yes. What do we need then to make it work? Is political will and commitment. In this case, I'll talk about the government. The government has enacted a law, that is Water Resources Management Act number 21 of 2011, which provides for the sustainable management of our water resources. And in that, they have also come up with an authority that is going to be the custodian or mandated to actually manage the water resources management. I mean, the water resources that we have. That already is a lot of political will and commitment. We need to have capacity development in terms of human capacity and also otherwise financial and all other things to manage these water resources. We need adequate investment, very critical. You can have institutions, you can have the laws, but that has to be supported by investment funds. We are going to look at it when we come to financial sustainability or funding of this aspect. So we need to have a financially stable or institution that is going to manage this whole process with, of course, sustainable cost recovery issues. Then monitoring and evaluation. What is this that we have started? Is it working? if it's not working, where do we need to amend, to adjust? It's very, very critical. Every time you put up something, you need to check whether it is going to work well, or if it doesn't work, where do we review and amend? So IWRM should be viewed as a process than a one-shot approach. Okay, so it's a process, it takes time, and it has to continue progressing, growing. I mean, ideas will come because of changing environmental aspects. So one that is long-term and iterative rather than a linear process. It's a process which seeks to shift. This is very critical. It's a process which seeks to shift water development and management systems from their current unsustainable forms. I think last time I spoke, I was saying half of this country, the southern part, is actually in a mess because of the way we have managed the water resources. We didn't mind how we farmed. We didn't mind how we planned our areas. As a result, most of the rivers are not flowing now. There used to be perennial rivers. They are now ephemeral rivers. The water bodies, lakes, swamps, they are drying up because of the way we have managed our water. So IWRM seeks to actually restore this kind of nature. Why is IWRM typical? When we look at our environment now, because of climate variability, we have a lot of hardships. And this is largely because of human activities, which has resulted in environmental degradation, which has impacted human life and also economic well-being. Just because of that, IWRM, which seeks to restore nature the way it's supposed to be, becomes very, very interesting, and everyone wants to jump on it. Even those that don't understand it yet, once they understand it, they will see that there's an opportunity in it. So in some cases, our water bodies have dwindled, and if I give an example, outside Zambia, Lake Chad, for example, is drying up. It used to be a very good lake. Here in Zambia, we've got rivers that are drying up. They just flow with water during rain season. Okay, so as I said, IWRM seeks to shift water development and management systems from their current unsustainable forms to one which is more sustainable, to restore and protect water resources for the benefit of humankind and the environment. Because of that, is very, very topical nowadays. Everyone wants to make sure that we have a good life again. How can shareholders then participate or get involved? As I said earlier on, thanks to the government that enacted this act, WRM Act number 21 of 2011, which was coined, so to say, on the IWRM principles that seek to decentralize the governance of water resources management in the country. We are talking of catchment management, sub-catchment management. And in that, we have stakeholders who are operating in those or who live in those catchments and sub-catchments. They need to be involved. This is what this means. Through the centralized governance structures, catchment, sub-catchment, and also local users, that is Water User Association, the stakeholders get involved in the management and development of the water resources. They have to be consulted. They have to give in their views because they've got different interests and also different needs. So it's very, very important that they are catered for. Thank you for this act. In terms of can the stakeholders be registered, that is their involvement. Yes, again, the act provides for that. We have these catchment, sub-catchment, local levels, and this is because they have got different needs, they have got different interests. So they have to be registered, registered, and already the act provides for that. The composition again is well spelled out in this act, and it takes cognizance of all the different users. So they will be made legal by the general regulations for the water resources management. once it is approved for Zambia's case. So a registration of these stakeholders. How does it happen? Why? It's because of the conflicts which come as a result of different needs and interests. They need to be regulated, even when they are going to participate. Otherwise, to be all conflicts and the people acting, pangering themselves. So they need to be controlled in the way they also involve themselves. So existing water-related problems are expected to increase, especially with the increase in climate variability. There will always be a problem because this water is though we say it's in abundance, but it's actually, because of population increase, a lot of industrial growth, the water is being pressured. As a result of that, these water-related problems, they always exist, and we need a system that is going to face the challenge. And this is IWRI. There is need for the integrated water resource management, which should be participatory, technically and scientifically informed, and which should be based on a bottom-up approach. Okay, there is therefore need to registrate the stakeholders involved because of the different local needs and also interests of the various user groups. This will actually help manage the conflicts, as I said earlier on, and also ensure the equitability issue. That's why they need to be registered. In terms of financing, okay, this I took this from the OECD studies. It's general, but I think the act we have has also taken care of these 4 principles. That is the polluter pays. We have seen in our case mines on the copper belt, sometimes they pollute the Kafue River. So they need to be charged for that. And that is one way of making sure that our rivers are health in terms of quality and also quantity. And of course, one of the principles is beneficiary pays. Again, we have seen our institution WAMA charging the users according to their usage and according to their category, which speaks to equity, because not everyone will manage to pay a certain amount as would be stipulated if water was going to be paid equally. But there's supposed to be equity. Those that can manage, they pay more to subsidize. Unfortunately, that's how it is life. So this is what equity means. Those that are poor, they still need the water. So they need to be facilitated in terms of equity payments. And of course, coherence. This means there are other policies that exist in a country. So the financing mechanism should speak to all those. For example, we've got the land policy, irrigation policy. All those things should actually speak together to make sure that we have got a sustainable financing mechanism. One which I didn't indicate here, for example, for Luapula, if we wanted to set up the Luapula River Authority, we may need a fund, a water fund, where Luapula can tap into, where other providers can tap into, as long as there's a proposal that can actually bring in development. I didn't put it here, but that is one of the things we can be thinking of. So the Zambian Water Resources Act is alive to all the above 4 principles, and government has issued SIs to allow WAMA, the institution which is mandated to manage water, to price water resources usage as the above 4 principles. Okay, in conclusion, we are saying IWRM seeks to shift water development management systems from their current unsustainable forms to one which is more sustainable, to restore and protect our water resources for the benefit of humankind and the environment. And of course, IWRM principles call for stakeholder involvement in water resources management. Involving stakeholders is an important step to ensure that catchment management plans take into consideration local needs, experiences, and also interests. Thank you. Thank you very much, moderator.
Great, Dr. Shindaile. Thank you so very much for that very elaborative and educative presentation. Actually, we could even conclude our webinar right now because you have addressed virtually all the critical components. Just an update, however, I think Engineer Kenneth Chense is having challenges to connect. Okay, I can see him back. Engineer, have we sorted out the connection stability?
Yes, I am back.
Great. Okay. Do you need a minute just to catch up, or we can go straight into the presentation?
We can go straight into the presentation. If you can share the screen, please.
All right, great. Yeah. Yeah, it's displayed. Are you able to see it?
Yes, I can see it now.
Yeah, please go ahead.
This presentation is leaning towards water security in regard to the role of stakeholders in integrated water resources management. Next slide, please. And in this regard, I want to speak about water stewardship. Simply, it's a shared responsibility. That is to say that there should be collective action for meaningful benefit to both the community and nature. So the need for water stewardship is that there's recognized pressure of water resources because the population is growing and there's increased economic development and there are also the negative effects of climate change. And at a global level, the organizations that we belong to are emphasizing more and more on the stewardship initiative integrity principles. Next slide, please. This is just an example of an alliance for water stewardship, just to give us a big picture of what it looks like. This is working in Lusaka Water. This is called the Lusaka Water Security Initiative, where the public sector is involved. There's also the civil society, private sector, international organizations, and their funders as well. The defined mission, core functions have also been defined. Next slide, please. On this slide, we can see that there should be targeted outcomes, which would involve stakeholders to partner and to collaborate. And there should also be an outcome concerning strengthened governance. And thirdly, upstream resource security. And thirdly, the reduction of wastage. Next slide, please. Here is a schematic view of what we are talking about in terms of water resource security. That is to say that collaborative and governance structures should bring together all the actions required for ecosystem protection, pollution prevention, storage of water, and also demand management of the resource, which is scarce. Next slide, please. I just now want to look at certain strategies that should go into each one of those areas that I've mentioned in the schematic diagram. The most paramount issue in terms of collaboration and governance is that there should be commitment. This commitment to the water stewardship and the company as well, such as Luapula Water, should be supported by a budget towards the water stewardship and compliance. And there should also be a water safety plan and a team in place. Secondly, for ecosystem protection, the ecosystem should be well identified in terms of flora and fauna, hydrological, and so on. And there should also be an identification of all the catchment stakeholders, because ultimately these are the ones that affect what's going on in the river basin. And there should also be knowledge of the catchment management plans that are available from certain important institutions such as WAMA and WWF. Challenges should be identified in terms of threats, risks, physiological, social, and economical. And this should be documented so that control measures that have been identified are well known to all the members that are going to take part in the action plan. And there should also be a monitoring and evaluation system. Next slide, please. The third item is that of pollution prevention. Having put the plans together, all the participatory stakeholders should engage both the ones upstream and downstream. And there should be compliance to the ZEMA regulations and also monitoring and evaluation of the actions being taken. In terms of storage, it's important to know the available storage and how it will be utilized to manage the demand, the state of those storage facilities in terms of leakages, overflows. This should be under control. In terms of demand management, which is the last one, the net use of water should be known. Demand also includes production losses. This should also be known and minimized. The water balance using the Iowa diagram is also important, and this should also be related to the energy consumption. Next slide, please. For Luapula Water, certain steps have been undertaken to create an action plan. 7 items in Q1. It's expected that firstly, formulation of water safety teams. These have been put in place. Formulation of water safety plan. This has been done. Stakeholder mapping. This has been done. And the risk register has been formulated. The next steps are to acquire title deeds for all the properties by Q3. And between Q1 and Q4, there's an ongoing community sensitization on the importance of the protection of the water resources. Number 7, by Q4, all the catchment areas should be fenced off or at least protected from encroachments. Here, we have seen that as avocado in Zambia is becoming very popular, and this is one of the fencing off innovations of catchment areas that we have in mind, just to plant avocado trees that will show from a distance that such an area is protected without this kind of, tree planting. The community would encroach on the river basins, and the river basins also not be protected if they are devoid of trees. Next slide. Having said that, I would like to conclude by saying, let water flow. I thank you.
Great. Thank you so very much, Engineer. Quite a very good presentation. And it speaks to actually, sorry, setting up the speed of the discussion. On the action plan that you showed on the slide, who is actually overseeing that?
Firstly, the water integrity stewardship principles prevail upon the CEO of the company to have a stated commitment which is visible to all. And within the company, we have selected the engineering director to spearhead the process. And in each of the districts, there are district managers to spearhead the process. Beyond the company structures, we have got stakeholders coordinated by the provincial water and sanitation officer, with the water officers that are spread out within the districts. And obviously, WAMA is the coordinating entity for the catchment areas. So in short, we are putting in place the enabling environment for the integrated water resources management as we look forward to the creation of the Luapula Water Basin Catchment Area Authority.
Yeah, from both presentations, I already see what can I say? Maybe the actual needs of this integrated water resource management. For instance, if we say we zero in into the Kalunguish River Basin, I am aware at the moment that there are several investments that have been lined up. Actually, this is following the Luapula Expo, the first one that was actually convened. At the moment, we have two major hydropower projects slated at the Kawerume and Kundawika waterfalls. At the same time, I know for a fact that there is a farm block in the upper reaches or upper parts of the catchment, the Kalunguishi farm block, which is demanding in excess of 200,000 hectares. And then just next to that, downstream, you have the Luena farming block. I do not know for sure where the Green 2000 agricultural project is, but I know for a fact that all these farming or agricultural projects are upstream of the sites of these two hydropower plants. In addition to that, we have a number of tourism projects also slot. In the same catchment, we have mini and small hydropower projects slated. I know for a fact that there is New Africa Power and Butok Power Company undertaking serious studies for that. And when you look at the water demand, I don't know if anybody has done a water balance. Yes, we do. I know we have one. But When you look at the water demand, it already sort of exceeds what all these projects will require for them to run sustainably and deliver prosperity. When we did the modeling, it shows that we will need at least 2 reservoirs, if not 4, for these projects to run sustainably. Now, if this is the case, and we are talking about energy, water, agriculture, and prosperity, what should be the first step to ensure that the prosperity we are talking about will be sustainable? And the other question would be, how fast do you reckon the implementation of IWRM ought to be implemented? And I invite all participants to ask questions and join in or raise hands and speak. I think we have about 20 minutes remaining now.
Yeah.
Doc, I can see you are itching to go. Yes, please.
I can go. I can make an attempt first. Yeah, it's very interesting with all that lined up investment programs. Of course, that is the whole idea of the expo. Good question. Where do we start from? I think you have said there's a water balance already, but I think it would be critical to actually quantify that is in the water balance, quantify what we have and where the water is, so that we carefully direct these investments where they should be. I know that for a fact, the farming blocks will be more requiring water resources, a lot of it, and it is more wasteful and more polluting than the other investments like hydropower. So we really need to know exactly where these farming blocks should be and how much water is existing in those areas. I know we can talk of catchment transfer, but again, that is a dicey exercise to take because of the ecosystems that exist in those different catchments, which has to be carefully studied before you can embark on such an exercise. So first things first, we need to quantify what is there and where it is. I think we needed also to come up with the IWRM platform already. If it's not there, I know WAMA is the champion of that, the one it is, but we need to have those structures existing in Luapula so that they can help plan and manage those investments. Otherwise, everyone want to take what they want to take, even when it is not there. The difficult part with water resources is that we think it is there perpetually, and because we can see it in Luapula River flow, we can see it in Chambeshi, we can see it in Karunguishi, so it's so much, and yet this water can actually finish anytime. So we need to have these structures in place so that they can help manage these allocations of water. Of course, with WAMA on top there championing the whole arrangement. Thank you for now.
Okay, great. Engineer Chenze, you have a contribution?
Yes, I think it's a very important question, moderator, and it comes down to the same thing that we have been discussing since this webinar series started. That is to say that there is need for an equitable allocation of water, and therefore all the stakeholders should be involved in managing the resource. And I would like to make a contribution towards the traditional way of doing things, which is to see the water resource as a mere natural flow of water in the river basin, or a natural availability of water in a lake. But I think that we need more and more thrust of what has begun to happen in regard to building dams across our river basins to impound the water during the times of high flows so that we can utilize that water that has been impounded in the times when we do not have much water flowing naturally in the river basins. With a caution that the impoundment war should not punish the downstream users. The impoundment war should be an enablement for more water to be available rather than a denial of water to the users downstream. Therefore, if you look at the examples that you have given for the Luena farm block where the farmers are upstream, it is a well-known fact that the farmers, when they take out water for irrigation, it is a transfer of the water resource from the basin to the arable land. And it takes a lot of time for the water to return to the river basin by way of infiltration through the soil, and therefore the immediate needs downstream will be affected. And therefore there must be a careful analysis of the outflows from any such upstream usage so that there is enough that remains for environmental flow in the river basin, and there's also adequate water to supply the needs for energy production and also the use of the water to abstract for the potable water supply. We have seen this happen in other river basins, such as the Nile River, the Aswan Dam, for example. Were very big. It caused problems at the beginning because in building up the lake after the building of the dam took some time, but there it is. There's some equitable flow. Still some challenges, but a way can be found if all the stakeholders are involved in the process and the risk analysis to manage any disadvantaging factors so that these are minimized in the long term.
Great contribution. Yeah, and in fact, when you mentioned about agriculture taking away the water and taking a long time for it to come back to the system through infiltration, I will add that part of water, I do not know the percentage though, is actually taken away for good as virtual water in the products that have been produced, say maize, because not all the maize or wheat is consumed within the catchment. So as we export those products, we are actually exporting virtual water. Great contribution and discussion. Now, with all this, what would be your advice to the stakeholders, the investors, the governance, and everyone involved as to the first steps to ensuring that prosperity is delivered in a sustainable manner in the catchment?
Yeah, I can go first.
Please, Doc. Yes.
Yeah, my advice would be to WAMA as the institution that is mandated to actually manage the water resources. That as a matter of urgency, because Luapula is actually moving fast, and they don't need to be frustrated with their goals of wanting to see investments in Luapula. So WAMA should move fast to make sure that the stakeholder participation aspect is actually actualized through I know that the general regulations are not yet approved, but we can still have those structures as interim or maybe shadow, so that they can, because stakeholders are there. And it's true, they are there, they're existing. So we cannot ignore them, even if the general regulations are not yet approved. So they should be involved. Let WAMA take leadership, make sure that the stakeholders are brought together, and these investments start being discussed already with the stakeholders, so that already plans can be put in place, how we are going to manage these investments in all those catchment areas. I think that would be very, very important.
Yeah. I don't know, Engineer Chance, you have a contribution towards that, because I am also looking at this proposed authority. We do have, yes, an enabling environment and the legislation through the Water Resources Management Act. These investments that are being called may not wait for the authority to be set up or for WAMA to come forth. They are in full throttle going ahead to implementation. What would be the extent of the authority of this proposed authority? As engineer also, Chancellor tries to contribute to the previous question.
I think that WAMA do have adequate authority and legislature to manage the current situation. Any further legislation will help to enhance the existing authority that they do already have. And we should also not forget the institutions that have competing interests in this whole scheme of utilization of water. And in this regard, we have the water companies coordinated with the regulator. Probably these water companies should have a water association so that they can have a voice. And they should also be side towards the electrical users. Fortunately, we have only one company that is striding across the nation, but we've got small grid producers that are coming on board. These should also have an association. The farmers already have an association, so they must come around the table. But I do think that there's adequate authority by WAMA. They must flex their muscles and bring the parties to the table and discuss around the resource water. But probably we should be generational thinkers and not take issues as would happen the next day and then react towards what is happening, but rather have a generational view of the planning horizon of up to, say, 50 years. What should be happening in terms of the development of the community in utilizing the resource, recognizing the nexus of water, energy, and agriculture. What should be happening in an area? Yeah, so we bring about the local authorities with their development plans, the traditional leaders, so that we should set in place a master plan of 50 to 100 years, and then begin working towards putting up structures and systems that will work for us.
And that could easily be captured in a catchment management plan for a given river basin, for instance. Yeah.
Indeed.
But now, yes, You also alluded to a very good idea of well, fencing the headwaters of some of these rivers using avocado. Well, it could be one of those initiatives to explore. But my discussion point now is alluding to the fact that the environment is also a water user, and it requires a certain percentage of the flow of the resource that we see and abstract and utilize. Now, more so that when this authority is set up and where Luapula province sits, whatever is going to happen is a transboundary issue. For a fact, the Luapula or the Chambeshi River, in fact, is the source of the mighty Congo River. And it just changes names from Chambishi to Luapula to Lualava as it goes forth. So I'm not sure of how much projects are on the other side. As they develop these proposals and projects, they will also need, they are looking at the resource that is there right now. But with these projects up here, and when we allocate a certain environmental flow, the question would be, will this be enough to sustain projects on the other side? And when it comes to management, for sure, for you to have that integrated water resource management such that you have your counterparts on the other side, you will need an institutional framework to facilitate this interaction, which is the proposed river authority. How do you look at the setup and the usage of this resource in such a transboundary manner?
Indeed, I think that it's an important point that you raised there, that this master plan should not just look at the national boundaries, but rather the countries that are using the water's resource. But probably we should even look at it beyond just two countries, but the whole region. And when you look at the whole region, you begin thinking of bodies like SADC, COMESA, African Union. Within there are conferences of ministers responsible for certain things that should drive this process in order to ensure that the whole region or the whole Africa is secure in terms of this water resource. Because certainly what happens here in Zambia, even though the river basin is not connected to South Africa, for example, if we're not careful with what we're doing with our rivers here and Zambia becomes a desert, then we will become a burden to South Africa, for example, in terms of their resources that may require to sustain us. So South Africa, for example, should be given a voice to say what we should be doing to take care of our resources, and Zambia should have a say on what South Africa should be doing to preserve their resources, because ultimately we depend on each other, whether or not our catchments are connected or not. So these international bodies should be enabled with a voice to regulate what we're all doing and accept master plans of a transgenerational nature beyond 50 years from now.
Well, thank you so very much. Unfortunately, I've been signaled that our time is up, but we can continue this discussion. It's very important, and I'm very passionate about it, because many a time we take it for granted that the water resource is there, is flowing, and will be there forever. I remember one time making a presentation at one of these prestigious hotels in Lusaka, and this question and comment came from a civic leader, which was very disturbing when he passed a comment that the Kafue River shall never dry until Jesus Christ comes. That was very baffling. So the word of caution to Luapula province or the northern catchments is that yes, the resource is there, and that's the reason why the Kasama catchment office under the Water Resources Management Authority was set up to set the rules on the ground, the catchment management plans, the e-flows, such that you know the available resource and you allocate it as investment comes to ensure that sustainability is attained. Because in everything in nature, even in our bodies, there is always a carrying capacity. You exceed that, you overload. Even the vehicles we drive have a carrying capacity. You cannot load a 12-ton truck with a 30-ton load. No, that principle or law works everywhere. So in conclusion, thank you very much to my speakers, Dr. Shindaile and Engineer Chense, and to the participants and to our energy speakers. I can see Engineer Ruben is still on. Thank you so very much, and Engineer Casaro. And my remark as I close is that integrated water resource is a sound framework which can help to deliver prosperity in Luapula province, which is a very important province, and all stakeholders must be active and participate and operate within nature's laws, because only the whole is reality. Thank you.